As we approach the end of this year, 2021, I know a lot of us tend to get retrospective and think back on what we've accomplished for the year or what we want to improve on for the following year. I actually wanted to take this opportunity and go a step further and look at the last 7 years of my music, specifically my orchestral music. And the reason I want to do this is because I think a lot of people get discouraged too early when they don't see the growth that they want to see in their own careers. And I want to basically highlight what my music sounded like 7 years ago in comparison to how it sounds today, and hopefully contextualize what it means to grow and the patience that's required to get there. I encourage you to stick around for the full video because if you don't, you're gonna miss out on what it actually looks like to see that full period of growth. But I'll also do my best to timestamp the moment, so if you wanna kind of skim and see where the specific pieces are, you can do that. So headphones on, first thing I wanna show you is a piece that I wrote about 7 years ago. This is when I first got Logic, called Spirit of the Woods. Now this is back when I had no template, and you'll see I'm running Logic 9 on top of that. So let's just listen to the beginning and we'll chat about it. Okay, so, it's not too bad. The musical ideas are there, and this is a theme that I think we're gonna see throughout, is I always felt like I had good musical ideas, but was just never able to execute them the way I wanted them to be. So, the strings, they sound okay, they're a little bit dull and muted sounding. The winds are a little bit thin sounding. My reverb usage isn't very great. One thing I leaned in heavily at this time was piano, because I'm a pianist myself, and I figured, hey, you know what? I can get piano to sound the way I want it to, because I can play it. So let's go over 6 years ago now to Forge of Heroes. This was something I wrote with my friend Frank, and it's a little bit more action-y. Okay, so a little better actually. The strings are a bit more active. One thing that I'll note is even when these things sound a lot better, they took me so long. These would take weeks and weeks to program, and it was just so much work compared to what I do now. The horn obviously needs a little bit more power, and for now I'm going to attribute all of this to my inability to program these things as opposed to just sample realism, because there's a bit of both, to be honest, but if I knew how to make the samples sing, then you can obviously make them sound a lot better. So this is pretty good. There's a little bit of progress even in just a year. Let's now hop over to 5 years, and we're gonna play something that I did for a game. It was a Minecraft mod. I don't think it ever came out. It's called the Aether 2. Okay. Again, more improvement. You'll see one thing I noticed is I actually needed more high end on all my mixes. My mixes were sounding really dull, and I think at this point I recognize I have to bump this up a little bit. My use of reverb is also getting a bit better in that I'm kind of pushing that reverb a bit more adventurously, and my orchestration is starting to improve a little bit. Really, my orchestration journey started in 2014. That's when I started to take it more seriously, and I started doing regular score studies and mock-up practice. So this is where you're gonna start to see that sort of find its way into my music. Let's now jump to 4 years ago, and this is where I did my first full-length soundtrack called The Hard Candy Kid. So here's the most orchestral cue, and also I should note that there is a live solo violin, so that doesn't count for synthestration, but we'll count it for orchestration. Okay, so you see it's getting a little better. I'm getting a bit more reserved, I think, in a good way, where I'm sticking with textures for longer than I used to, and I think that actually really helps. Confidence sometimes in orchestration means using less, not more, and I'm still guilty of that. But this is where I think I'm starting to rein it back a little bit in a positive way. Now, after the hard candy kit, I really got focused on getting my orchestration chops better. So what I started doing was 1 cue a week. And I only did that for about 5 weeks, but I can tell you I made some significant growth from start to finish of that period. For reference, here is the first cue I did from that week called Mouse on a Mission. Okay, so that was October 6th. Now let's just hop over to the last cue I did. That was in November. Yep. So here's this one. Now, at this time, I really genuinely thought this is the peak. I can't do any better than this. Retrospectively, listening back, I obviously hear a lot of things that could be improved, which terrifies me about writing music now because I'm like, I'm going to feel the same way. But it was cool to know that I had hit a point where I was like, I can't do any better than this right now. And I knew that it would just take time. Thankfully, the next project I did was work for the Merry Mercenaries, which was a D&D group that no longer exists, but I worked with them for about 2 years writing a cue once a week. So it was a good catalyst doing these charts. Here's a cue I did kind of in the middle of working with them. Sounds more full, starting to sound more full. Then for reference, here's another one I did closer to the end of working with them. Way more present sounding. You'll see I discovered some sounds that were kind of new, non-orchestral things that I started to incorporate into my music a little bit more. But the production obviously is getting much better at that point. Then I started working with the Armchair Historian, which was another great catalyst because I was writing a lot of orchestral music specifically for militaristic stuff, so war music. So here is the first cue I did for him. Okay, and then the most recent cue I did for him was called Thunder from the West, where you can hear that growth. That was over the course of a year. Okay, so you can see all this growth happening slowly but surely, and sometimes it's with the orchestration, sometimes it's with the production, sometimes it's with the mix, but that growth does happen. The next project I did was Frostfell, which many of you have heard. I don't even feel like I need to play it very much if you're familiar with my music. But just for reference, that was not really mock-up driven. It was all about production and working with live musicians. And I'll play just a little piece of one of the cues so you can hear what I was kind of aiming for with that. So here's the most orchestral one. Okay, so obviously like my orchestration is getting really good at this point, I think. At least I'm happy with it. From that point, I'm like, I have to start applying this into my actual mock-ups. So that was for individual players. And so I wanted to take that fine-tuned approach and apply it towards my mock-ups. I think that one of the best examples of my mock-ups to date is actually the score I did for the spring competition. That's where I think I got my mock-up sounding really good. And a lot of you have heard my music up to the most recent point. So score relief, that was only 10 months ago to this date of making the video. And let's play a little excerpt of that so you can hear sort of where we've landed after all these years. So, growth is something that happens slowly, as you can see. Slowly but surely. And as I said, I know that I'm going to be looking at this piece, Spring, and seeing all the things that I could have improved. But what's important is that you give yourself that encouragement to release something when it's as good as you can possibly get it, not waiting for it to be perfect. Look back retrospectively on the things you can improve, but gently, not with such a critical eye that you beat yourself up. You want to always be in your corner and support yourself through that growth process. And it's challenging to be patient, especially in an industry that kind of demands that we keep moving, keep doing things, grinding, we're our own bosses. It's very challenging to be patient, but I encourage you to exercise that patience and recognize that growth is a culmination of effort and time, and you can't rush the time aspect. It's just gonna happen. The things I did that I think helped my growth the most was just being consistent and always looking for my weak spots, always trying to figure out what I could be better at. So for an example, right now, what I'm trying to aim for with my future music is to write more soft brass passages. Most of the brass I use right now is kind of loud and adventurous or actiony, and I wanna get more comfortable with using them as a softer texture in my music. So I'm always looking for things to improve in my music, but again, like I said, with that gentle approach, not beating myself up, but just saying, here's what I'm gonna work on next. So I encourage you to do that for next year. I hope you found this helpful or interesting as to see my own personal growth, and if you have questions, please do leave them in the comments. I also encourage you to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and if you wanna really support me, you can check out my Patreon, where we have a couple members that are basically funding all of my videos to date. So thank you so much to the patrons who can choose to contribute, and if you'd like to support me, I really appreciate it. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.